Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Samurai 7 Retrospective here on OAM. With the characters of the series examined, let's get into a few of the themes. Now, a lot of these themes are applicable to both this adaptation of the movie and the original movie itself. Don't worry, the adaptation versus movie video is also coming along, and will probably be one of the last videos in this retrospectives. Now, when coming up with themes for this video, I came up with several that were all kind of related, and for this reason kind of just decided to meld them all together, as it felt like making a video on one without the other would kind of be incomplete. As such, this video will examine the series' position on battle, honor, and glory, and how the portrayal of such concepts supports an overall message of pacifism. Now, in a piece titled Samurai 7, which prominently features cool samurai battles, there are some surface-level expectations that come about simply hearing the title of the series and, seeing a few highlights of it. These surface-level expectations and/or cliches is that this will be a tale of righteous violence done by a group of honorable men against crude bandits, and that our heroes will redeem everyone in a furor of holy combat. That is to say that combat will be glorified and ennobled as a tool of justice. Now, Samurai 7 does almost everything in its power to say the exact opposite, though. While the honorable men against crude bandits part can, probably be taken at face value, the rest cannot. Violence is never portrayed in this series as anything more than a necessary evil at most, and no one is really 100% redeemed. In fact, everyone kind of just loses at least part of themselves along the way. We can see this in numerous characters, like Katsushiro, who loses his naivete and innocence, and even Kanbei, who has already lost it long ago, and as such is kind of a cold, hollowed-out shell of a man. There is no happy, clean ending where everyone just goes, "Yeah! We won that massive battle, cured my inner demons, and had no losses of our own or long-term psychological damage resulting for it. Everything's great now." No, instead it's a very realistic portrayal of violence and suffering, showing that even victory in combat has its costs. Violence is never glorified, and instead shown to be a sort of corrupting miasma which negatively affects all involved, even if their involvement is justified. Violence corrupts and brings down, and while some things need to be brought down, violence is not the optimal solution, only one of last resort to be used in desperation. While individual warriors can conduct themselves honorably, there is no honor in the concept of violence itself, and battles are not scenes of glory, but instead of horror and suffering. The expectation of a noble battle is shattered again and again throughout the series, as battle is shown to be more of a brutal struggle in the mud if anything else. And even when the test of battle is passed, it still haunts all those who took part in it. We can see this most with the most and least experienced samurai of the cast, Kanbei and Katsushiro. Katsushiro is young and naive. He serves as sort of an ill-informed youth, looking towards fighting under the false precepts of honor and glory, and therefore also as sort of a viewer POV. As he experiences hardships, though, and pain in battle, and, personal loss and growth, his illusions of glory and honor are slowly washed away, and in turn, so are those of the viewer. In fact, this is one of the greatest parts of his evolution, watching him slowly realize that by ingraining himself into conflict, he has ingrained conflict within himself. Sure, his engagement can be justified. I'm not arguing he's a bad person. However, justified or not, he cannot undo any of the things that he has done, or the mental scarring received as part of this. While it is true that he did the right thing, he still had to take methods which were damaging to himself, that were still traumatizing. He still suffered for doing the right thing. This just shows that while the use of violence can be justified, violence itself is never something positive or fun. It's tragic because even though Katsushiro wielded violence for good, he is still negatively affected by it, simply because violence itself is such a strong and traumatizing force. We also see this in Kanbei, a man whose extensive experiences have numbed him to many other things in the world. He has ditched all precepts of righteous fury and glory and honor in combat, and instead kind of just goes with the narrative that he's done what he's had to do, he'll do what he'll have to do, and that he's kind of just an empty loser at this point, blowing about in the wind. In him, we see a man who has lost his naivete and innocence and even joy long ago. He's paid the price for having done what he's done, and while realizing that he had to pay it and it was the right thing to do, it was not a positive experience. He is still a good man, but because of his many violent experiences, he's also a man in great pain, and a man who could never return to the bright youth he probably once was. Instead now, he's a tired and cynical man, simply going about different motions of existing. Through these characters and many others in Samurai 7, the series in turn says that conflict isn't glorious or honorable, and that it should only be sought out and performed when necessary. The idea that glory can be found on a battlefield is shot down pretty early, and instead simply shown to be a naive foible. Dying in and of itself is not glorious, and sacrifice is not the same as simply getting yourself killed. Simply getting killed for an abstract concept like glory is a bit silly, as there's no point in seeking a reward if you can only get that reward by dying. Therefore, true glory and victory comes in simply surviving, living into the future so you can hopefully make one where violence doesn't befall the people as much as it did in your own time. All of this, of course, is provided that your own victory and survival in battle didn't come at dishonorable means, as employing dishonorable means is, pretty obviously also dishonorable and bad. Samurai 7 establishes that conflict is inherently bad and or not glorious, and that simply dying is not necessarily glorious either. And this leads us to ask, what is it to be an honorable warrior, then? Is it even possible to be one? To answer the first question, Samurai 7 does seem to say that yes, it is possible to be an honorable warrior, though doing so ironically requires a sort of disdain for violence. An honorable warrior must realize that they must only fight when absolutely necessary, and they must have the necessary restraint and control to only use the amount of violence needed. This is because a righteous warrior needs to know of the unrighteous nature of violence, and the need to resort to it only when needed. What truly determines whether or not a warrior is honorable boils down to the methods he employs and why he fights. To start, an honorable warrior should employ some kind of code of honor in fights, not necessarily anything super extensive or drastic enough to greatly restrict his actions, but enough to ensure he doesn't go overboard and stays loyal to his cause. And that cause, most importantly, determines what makes a fight honorable. Fighting solely to exploit others, or to hurt others, or to prove your own power to others, or simply go out of your way to try and flex on others is dishonorable. Fighting for oneself and or to protect and prove oneself in times of great stress or need is neutral. There is nothing wrong with raising a hand in defense if you have literally no other options. And fighting for the sake of those who cannot fight, for the sake of the weak, to maintain justice and honor, and to put down those who seek to use their force for dishonorable means, is honorable. While the samurai themselves do not necessarily hold themselves up to be the best or most honorable men, we can clearly see they are, as this is what they fight for. They fight for an insignificant group of people who can't fight for themselves. They put themselves at the disposal of others, and in this selfless act prove themselves to be truly honorable. Against this are the crude bandits, who fight only for themselves, and for this reason, and for their barbarous methods employed, are proven to be dishonorable. However, note, while this may or may not determine which warriors are honorable or not, it doesn't make the violence they perform righteous. It only justifies it as an inevitable tragedy.